stop something. Thank you. Anyway, without going into any more information, Laura, I would like to introduce you and have you talk just a little bit about our program next month. Next month is our 9th anniversary, believe it or not, of this program. As you know, it has won the the State Library's Award for Best Multicultural Program in the state, a fact of which we're very proud and humbled. But it has only been getting better, and tonight's program will attest to that, as next month's program, which is a great program to celebrate our 9th anniversary. We had hoped we would be outside and be able to see each other in person, but unfortunately we can't do that because of the construction. So it will be once again a virtual program, but in the future there will be hybrid programming at some point. So Laura, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the program next month.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to meet you. And Annabelle, thank you for a few minutes of my cutting into your time before your great program. So yes, I'm a racial healer. What does that mean? It means that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I took some classes and I won a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to do this training with Dr. Gail Christopher. If you don't know who she is, she's kind of the pioneer for something we call TRHT, and it stands for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Sidebar, her daughter is Heather McGee, who wrote The Sum of Us. So, and the reason why I became so passionate about it is because about 5 or 6 years ago, my family, which is from South America, came here undocumented and became citizens. And I felt more free to speak out and to do these kinds of programs. And so what, if you sign up, and I hope you do, it's more like a workshop. So we'll work in pairs and as a group together, and we'll go a little bit deeper into conversations about race. Sometimes the questions that I'll ask you, that I'll pose to you, and you'll work in small groups, are not inherently about race, but they're designed for us to listen deeply, to participate in active listening, and to do some storytelling. Storytelling is a great practice that started with Indigenous tribes, and it's something that is modified to help with bringing people together and finding out what brings us closer together versus what divides us. So that's just a small snapshot of what it's about. And if anyone has questions, I know that Linda will be having some literature later in the month, and I hope that you all come. It'll be a great program. I'll be co-hosting with a fellow racial healer who is Zan Goodman. She is the pioneer of cultural humility in libraries, and it's going to be wonderful. So thank you.
We look forward to it. I think everybody pretty much knows Zoom protocol by now. I see everybody's got their screen muted, but this is the time when Patty usually joins to just tell us about Zoom etiquette and anything else that she wants to add before Claire will introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Yes, I see we're all learning how to mute. And just so you know, you're certainly free to keep your cameras on or off during the program. As always, we always allow a certain amount of time after the presentation for the audience to reach out with either questions or comments. You can either raise your hand electronically or put a note in the chat. Claire, Linda, and I will be monitoring the chat as well. And Annabelle actually is including some audience participation in her program. So that's all. Enjoy. Claire?
Thank you, Patty. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Annabelle. And I would like to introduce our wonderful speaker tonight, our guest. Annabel Sparano is a 10th grade student at the Rainey School. She's an accomplished classical pianist, participating in several national and international competitions annually. She also enjoys athletics and played varsity first singles for her high school tennis team. Her academic interests include Competition Math and Model United Nations. Annabel was the scholarship recipient of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 2023 YMCA Essay Contest. She engages her community through various local organizations, through which she serves as a volunteer and performer. She is currently studying the relationship between music, neurobiochemistry, and human psychology. And thank you for joining us, Annabel, and I will turn the program over to you.
Good evening, everyone. So, as you know, my name is Annabel Sparano. And before I begin, I'd just like to thank Mrs. Hewitt and Mrs. White for providing this opportunity to me. But so I just kind of wanted you all to get to know me a little bit better. I mean, that was a great introduction. So thank you, Mrs. Phelps, too. But so the whole way that I became involved in this program was through originally sharing my story. And so another one of the extracurriculars I really enjoy is writing. And so I discovered the Martin Luther King YMCA essay competition, and the essay prompt was, what is your experience with racism, and what have you done to make an impact on the community? So I shared my personal story, and then I went on to explain ways that I plan to implement change within the community with regards to racism. And so what I'm trying to do is begin discussion forums within nearby high schools and middle schools similar to this one. So students my age can really just open up about their opinions and respectfully listen and share their experiences. So with that, I'm going to screen share a little presentation, and I would first like to start by sharing my stories. And also I saw a chat that said, if you I would love to get to know the audience a little bit better. So if everyone wants to just say their name, and feel free to turn your camera on if you're comfortable, because I really want this to be an interactive discussion as well, not just me speaking the whole time. So yeah.
So those of you that are with us, if you'd like to just say who you are. Might have.
I know sometimes it's hard with unmuting and all that.
Mhm.
Hi, Sue Goldberg here.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Hi, it's Kirsten Riga. I also work at the library with Linda and Claire.
Okay, great to meet you.
Apologies for the camera. It's the crazy night, and I don't want everyone to see me, but I'm happy to participate, and thank you for having me.
Well, we thank you for being with us tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Hi,
I'm sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Someone else is speaking. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I'm Sumaina Prabhu. I work with the Two River Times.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
we're
Okay,
so
great.
glad. Thank you so much for the great articles that you do for us. We're not usually lucky to have you with us in person, so this is a real honor.
Well,
Thank you.
you for offering such great programming. It's rare to have some libraries push conversations that are difficult, but very, very important in a community.
Well, we're so glad to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
And Liz?
Okay, I'm Liz Giacobelli. I'm on the board at the Guild of Creative Art in Shrewsbury, and trying to be active in the community, especially since I was fortunate enough to retire a few years ago. And Sunyana, I love your paper and your article.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Anyone
Anybody
else?
else?
Anyone else?
And I love seeing your faces like in person if you're comfortable with that. So
Yeah, we always ask everyone if they can mute themselves, but it's wonderful when we can see everybody's faces.
Seen but not heard.
Yes.
okay, so I will start the presentation. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so the title of this program is Speak Up for Responses to Racism. So my story was, this is just like a quick little anecdote. So another thing about me is that I'm a child of a mixed race marriage. So my mother comes from like an Indian descent, and then my father is Italian. And my grandparents are immigrants from India. And then my great grandparents on my dad's side are immigrants from Italy. And so I've really been like exposed to several cultures, and both of my parents really appreciate culture. They love to travel, and so that's really just been a huge part of my childhood and my development of such a strong appreciation of different cultures, and which has always like sparked my interest in getting to know other people and like trying and experiencing different things. So I would say like 2 summers ago, or like 1 summer ago, I was with a group of like my friends, and then like a group of boys, they made a comment about like my Indian background, which was racist and like rude. And I was kind of just struck. I'm 15 now. I was like 13 years old, and I didn't really know how to respond. All of my friends just stood there and like said nothing, and I said nothing. And it was like on a FaceTime call, so then I just kind of left. But it really hurt my feelings, and it really stuck with me for days after. And I didn't know what to do with the situation. And then at school the next day, a few of my friends came up to me and were like, Annabelle, like, we're really sorry that happened. And in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I really appreciate them saying that, but they should have said something in the specific time that it happened. And then like another day, one of the boys who said something actually apologized to me, which was like nice, but still, you shouldn't have said that in the first place. And so I was really just carrying around kind of this guilt and embarrassment and regret all bundled into one, because I was like, I can't believe I didn't stick up for myself. Like, I've always been taught to just speak up, like use my voice. But the problem is not that I didn't want to, is that I didn't know how. And I now realize that. And so after like a few weeks, I really opened up about my experience to my parents. And they explained, especially my mom, she said she grew up in, I'd say, like a much less socially aware kind of time period. And she just said that it's really important to prepare yourself for those situations. She was like, honestly, it's not your fault that you didn't have no response, because you wouldn't know any better. Like, and so the whole point of this program was kind of to teach people how to have the importance of having a canned response to prepare you for such a situation. And honestly, this can be applied to many situations outside of just racist comments. I know there's a lot of women on this call today, and the like step process is pretty similar. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy. So there are really 4 questions that you should be asking yourself before you respond to a certain situation. So first you need to determine whether you have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to engage at that specific time. Like if you're really overwhelmed by something that another person said, it may not be like the best idea. If you're going to break down in tears, it may not be the best moment to say something in that specific moment, and that's okay. So it's important to just assess how you're feeling in the first place, then determine the timing, the power dynamic, and the context of the situation. So the timing, it's arguably even more effective to just have it, like, share your response after the fact, after you've had a little bit of time to like plan what you want to say, instead of just blurting out some like bad comeback. And then power dynamic, that's more so meaning how aggressive but also like assertive you're trying to be, and the context of the situation, like whether it's even worth addressing at all, whether it's some microaggression or some really extreme situation. Then determine if it would be safe for you to respond, because this can be overlooked, and situations like these, as we've seen through the media, can lead to really, really dangerous consequences. And 4, determine whether you respond privately or publicly. Private examples are sending a text to someone after you didn't like what they said, or reporting it to your boss if like having that private conversation with your boss instead of like the direct conversation with the person, and then publicly just outright saying something using social media. So there are really 6 responses. I'm mostly focusing on the 6th one, which is verbal responses, but I found this really great site which elaborated on all 6. So the first one is question. When you use a question to kind of respond to, like, say someone says a racist comment to you, and then what you can say is, or like says a comment as a fact, which a lot of people do. Like one example is, I know there's like a lot of debate about like illegal immigration and such. And so what you can do, instead of saying you're wrong, I can't believe you'd say that, or like insulting them back, what you can say instead is, where did you hear that from? Or where did you get that from? Or what's your, like, do you have a source on that? Like if someone's saying something as a fact that is not true, because it's a way of like kind of undermining their argument without like being aggressive. And then the second approach is inform. So you can, it's great to have knowledge on many current events, which like I've developed through my experience with Model United Nations. And like if someone is acting like, oh, this group of people is factually better than this group of people, or superior, you can literally just blur out a fact that you know, and it can completely change the situation, because ultimately, like if we're talking about the roots of racism, a lot of it is just based in belief and like lack of social education or awareness sometimes. And so the third thing is rephrase. If you hear, this is more so for a bystander too. So if you hear someone says a racist comment, you can almost do the correcting for them and rephrase what they said in a way that's less offensive. And that can go long ways in fixing a situation. The fourth way is to withdraw. This is going back to our the 4 things to think about before you respond. And sometimes it's just best to withdraw and then wait for the time that's best to respond, or just don't say anything about it if it's really not worth the battle. But I would think safety first for that. And then the 5th is report. Sometimes people just won't listen to you when you respond or speak up for yourself or speak up for another group of people, because clearly they don't have the respect for you if they said such things to you in the first place. So sometimes you need to report it to someone that they will listen to, and that's like an indirect way to get your message across. And feel free to like pop in and share your comments too if you want to. Does anyone have anything to say so far? Okay, and then number 6 is directly challenge someone. Again, this is not by like personally attacking them, but it's more so by it's by expressing how you feel, being in an assertive but polite manner. And we'll talk more about that. So knowing what to say. So that's more how to respond, but this is now knowing what to say. And I'm getting into the nitty-gritty here. So the first thing is to start firmly, so that you know that like, don't mess with me, like. So start firmly. What has been an example is what has, and get your message across that what has been said was racist and wrong. It can literally be 2 words. That's racist. And that's assertive enough. The second thing you want to say is how it made you feel, and personalize your response with that person. That really hurt my feelings. Like a friend wouldn't say that. Number 3 is explain why the statement is racist. You just commented on my skin color as if it has anything to do with my personality. That's an example. Number 4, explain how hurtful or dangerous these statements can be in the future. And so for this, sometimes for that, you can say like that I wouldn't want you repeating that to anyone else, or like you don't understand that like comments like those can be really hurtful or put you in danger. And then number 5, invite the person to learn more. A great strategy for responding to racism is to turn it from like a fight to an educational experience. Go from wanting to attack that person to educating that person, because again, that gets at the root of the cause. So for number 5, you can say like, I'm working on becoming more socially aware, socially accepting. I encourage you to do the same. And number 6, reiterate how hearing this statement from this person specifically has affected you. Again, like if it's a friend, if it's a parent, if it's a sibling, like just say I don't really like hearing those things coming from you, or like I wouldn't want a friend saying those things to me. Mom, I can't believe you would say something like that. And then 7, provide a call for action or further support. Sometimes, and this is a replacement for like a threat. So if it's in work, if it's at work, if it's in school, say if something like this happens again, I'll be going to the teacher. I'll be going to the principal. But another way is to also use this as a chance to educate them. So we won't go through this whole thing. I kind of just did this, but this was like a sample situation. And basically the person was responding to their mom, and they hit on all 7 points. I don't know if you can read that.
You'd like me to read it, Annabelle?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so this is an example verbal response, and the first thing is that's racist. Do you want to add to that, Annabelle?
No, this was literally just someone's verbal response, and this is an example of how it can flow with all of the steps, like in a realistic situation. So
That's
you can
racist.
just read all the way through.
I'm really shocked and disappointed to hear this from anyone, but especially coming from my mother. When someone says Black Lives Matter, they are not saying all lives don't matter. Of course, all lives matter. But if one's house is on fire, you aren't going to withhold water to extinguish the flame because you're wondering why that house gets water, but the other houses near it, which are not on fire, don't. Statements like these are harmful towards Black people. By saying this, you're minimizing the situation. By saying this, you're actually saying the opposite of what you may intend, that Black lives don't matter as much as other lives. I've been working on becoming anti-racist and unlearning a lot of harmful views that I didn't even realize were racist. I want to be an ally for those who are targeted or affected by racist systems, racist comments, or even subtle, less overt racism. I hope you're just saying this because you didn't know. But now that I've shared this, you have a better understanding of why it's wrong and that you won't say it again. You're my mother, and I care so much about you. I know that you're kind and compassionate. I know that perhaps you meant well or didn't mean for this time, I know that perhaps you meant well or didn't mean for this to come off as racist, but I need you to know that it is, and that's unacceptable. I hope you take some time to reflect on what I've shared. It is important for me to have these conversations, so if you want to talk through this with me, I'm here. There are also many anti-racism resources out there, from books to articles, movies, podcasts, and other online tools. If you want, I can share more information with you, and we can work towards being anti-racist allies together.
So that just puts it all into one realistic situation. And then, I mean, now there's text messaging. So a practice text response, which would be a little bit more concise, is hello blank. It was racist when you said all lives matter instead of Black lives don't matter. And that, and then how it made you feel. If anyone wants to do this, or just like, this is a little template, and I thought that was really helpful. Like, if I had used this in my little situation, then I feel like that would have definitely been effective after the incident happened.
I have my hand up to say,
Oh, yes.
I
Don't
like
even raise your
this.
hand, just pop in.
Okay. These are very, very good ideas. And I like this one for texting because it kind of, sets the tone. You start the conversation, because sometimes it can get, contentious. So, starting with a text, you can say what you have to say, it's written down. And then it's, the onus is on the other person to respond. And, it might be a little bit less tense in that sense. And then you can go from there and then maybe meet face to face and discuss it further. All of the tactics are good, but I like this. And something comes to mind, an incident that I had, thinking also that if I had had this script, it might have been, because I didn't, like you, I didn't say anything about it. And I still think about the fact that I didn't say anything to this day as well sometimes. But maybe a text message might have been a good way to start the conversation.
Yeah. Would you mind sharing your incident? Don't feel like pressured or anything.
Well, yes, a friend, a white friend that I had known for many, many years. And the situation is that there were like 6 couples in the group that we were in years ago. And we all had dinner parties and rotated at each other's homes, for many, many years. And a lot of times conversations would come up at these dinner parties. And at the time, my husband and I were the only African-American couple in that group. And there were couples from other cultures as well. And sometimes, the conversations were very spirited, not so much heated, but one of the women, who was like kind of a friend of mine, she admitted that she had come from a racist family and that she was like really trying. So fast forward to a situation where she was with, her husband actually passed away, and then she had another gentleman in her life who was not as open-minded. And he relayed a situation to her at the job about affirmative action. And he was very upset about a situation where I think an African-American man was either going to take his job or something happened there. And that she was going on and on about it. And I felt like saying, why are you talking to me about it? Because I'm not the expert on affirmative action like this. And I felt like, because I'm Black, that, she thinks that I'm going to have an answer, because I didn't even have all the background information. And part of me said, well, maybe, I'm being a little too sensitive. But at the same time, if she had given me more information, because she was angry as she started to talk about it. And I'm like, whoa, it's, don't put this on me. And so, other comments had come up before, and I didn't say anything. I'm like, well, maybe, go back to your boyfriend and, have him talk to his manager, because I don't have enough information to really advise you or him. I can only give you my take on what I think affirmative action is for. And, this is now in the news again. And, people are saying all of the things that they're saying, the pros and cons of affirmative action. And I had, I spoke my piece as to what I felt was good about it and defending it. And then she, on the other hand, felt that it was antiquated, like a lot of people do. So I'm thinking that maybe later on a text message to start that conversation further would have been good. But I was upset, about it for a little while afterwards. So.
Right.
Mhm.
And it goes to show that sometimes when people are trying to be respectful, they're still being disrespectful in a way, and that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have
so-
more on that.
So that's one of my stories.
Yeah, and feel free to
So.
share more.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I agree. Like, shooting a text is a lot more comfortable too. It's hard to kind of speak up for yourself, like face to face, especially to someone that you're friends with. But if it's a text message, like, some people are ruthless behind a screen, but
Yeah.
definitely it's easier to have less fear, because it's like scripted and it's written out.
Exactly. And you have time to think about it, because a lot of times incidents come up and you're really caught off guard.
Right.
And I found myself really caught off guard, in many instances. So thank you so much for all of these points and these tips.
Yeah.
No problem.
Annabelle, if I could just interject, I mean, you are our youngest presenter that we've ever had for this program. So please don't beat yourself up for not having a response. At my age, I still often don't have responses. We've talked in the program as a white person. I mean, friends say things, and for me, I'm not a confrontational person. And even just this week, we have a lot of Jewish people moving into the community that are Orthodox. Now, most people, other than people in this program, don't know that I came from a mixed marriage of religion. And my father was Jewish, and no one came to my parents' wedding from my father's family. So I grew up, I'm not a religious person at this time because I saw religion being so divisive. But I listened, I went over to help an almost 90-year-old neighbor the other night, and she's sick and her husband's sick, and she's telling me about all the Jews. And I'm just listening and not saying anything. And I got home and I just felt terrible because, you know, she is sick, and I went there to make her feel better, not worse. But ever since being there, I felt like I should have said something to her. And I said nothing. So there are many of us a lot older than you are who are still fighting the situation of how to speak up. That's why this program is so important.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring this up to everyone else on the call. Like, I'm sure everyone on this call has had some point in their life wish that they said something at a point that they didn't, or wish I said something completely different than what I did. And not in just like a racist situation, but just in general, like, oh, I wish I really said something to that person or for that person. And so I'm sure everyone has that little feeling of like regret or even embarrassment. And instead of kicking yourself for that, you should prepare yourself for a situation that may come up in the future. And I mean, there are really situations like this all around us. And like we learn about them through the media, and there are ways to speak up using social media nowadays. So I agree. Like I've moved past that situation, and I've educated myself on how to respond in an effective way. Is my connection okay?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
If you
It
speak
is.
up a little bit, it would be helpful.
Okay, I think okay, it said something else with my connection.
No, it's fine. We can
Okay,
hear
that's
and
good.
see you. Okay.
Okay. All right, so moving on to microaggressions. So in case you're unfamiliar with what those are, this one scientist, I'm blanking on her name right now, but I discovered this one man, who was a psychologist, and like a racial psychologist, that's what they called, and from Colombia. And so he classifies microaggressions as with two parts. So the first part is conscious communication of the initiator, which was likely intended to be a surface level compliment. This is kind of what I was getting at with Mrs. Phelps, which is like they mean well, but they aren't actually communicating it in a respectful manner. And then unconscious metacommunication, which is the message of microaggression. And for this, it's more so shown, I feel like, in actions. Like, I'll give some examples. So, one example is, "You're so articulate, you don't sound Black," or like, I've seen like people, I've experienced like, "Oh, what is that smell?" And it's like, it was next to like one of my Indian friends. And it's just like, rude and disrespectful.
Mm.
And then an example of unconscious metacommunication is unnecessarily calling the police on someone who didn't do anything wrong, or like a lot of people clutching their purse walking past someone of a different race. Like all of that is shown as microaggressions. And addressing microaggressions, and the reason I'm talking about microaggressions is because I feel like that's the most common form nowadays. It's not just some, like, now in like 2023, people understand that, like, on the grand scale, it's not socially acceptable to be racist. I'm saying for the most part. Some people are very open, but like, that's less common. It's more so shown through these microaggressions. So addressing the unconscious message requires micro interventions. So step one to that is make the invisible visible. Make it clear that what they said is racist. So you can literally say, that's kind of racist, or that's a little bit disrespectful. I wouldn't repeat that in the future. Or again, use questioning. Why are you clutching your purse like that? So those are just examples. And then number two, educate the perpetrator by shifting the focus of what the person intended to do to the impact. So by educating them, I mean, you're basically just doing exactly that. Like, if a person intended it to be a compliment, you can say, I know you probably meant well, but that's kind of presumptuous of you, or that's kind of the word, like, disrespectful. Whatever the situation is. And number three, disarm the microaggression by steering conversation away and potentially addressing it later. So when you disarm the microaggression, sometimes, a lot of the time, it's best to not give people a stir, or give the incident a lot of attention in that moment. Like, you never know if someone's actually looking for a reaction out of you. So, or looking to make you look bad in a certain situation and almost like prove their point. So don't be too emotional, don't be too aggressive, because that's not effective. When you keep your cool and you're assertive, that's what, like, gets your message across. And again, making it educational. Like, even if you can't change their beliefs, you can prove them wrong.
Yes, that is a good point, in terms of staying calm to address situations. Because like you said, there may be people that are trying to instigate situations, and at the end make them look, better than you, even though you were the one who was insulted. And that's really really bad. It's important because with young people, well, anyone, but with younger people, sometimes the emotional component is there, so it's not always so easy to stay calm. And I don't want to say just younger people, it just depends. I've had someone actually say that, you're so articulate comment. Yeah, I've had somebody say that to me. And and I just do take that as an insult. I mean, I've heard it, posed to other people as well. I don't know why that particular phrase seems to be, something that people use, but it is. So yeah.
And
Like
how would you respond to that now? Would you respond to that in the same way, or would you, like, say something now?
I would say something. I would question, exactly what, they meant by that. I'm just as intelligent as the next person. You know, there are just so many assumptions made behind a statement like that. That in itself is a little bit of a long story, but I definitely would say something to somebody. Then I would kind of try to explain that, you know, we do hear, you know, people do hear that a lot. People do say that every once in a while. And it's actually, in my view, it's offensive as, you know, as opposed to a compliment. It's not really a compliment, because to me, what you're saying is that, oh, you're really smart for being a minority, you know, no matter what, you know, like race or religion or whatever that person is. I'm surprised that, you know, you speak that way. I'm surprised you know this. I mean, to me, you can just take that, you know, so far, and I just find it to be insulting. So, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Does anyone else can anyone else like share a story about a time that they experienced a racist, just witnessed racism? I'll leave it broad.
Sure. So I don't mind sharing. So, you know, for a lot of us, we hold a lot of trauma because we've heard a lot of things depending on what skin we live in. Like, I've heard a lot of things about speaking English. Like, many times, I've had a supervisor maybe a couple of years ago marvel at my English language. Now I'm native born, so English is actually my first language. And so I get that comment a lot, especially if we are speaking in our family's first language, which is Spanish. I hear this all the time. So I started a new job. I work at Monmouth University. And I heard people working at the library. And now I want to say too, I don't think it's intuitive that I am a Latina, because my last surname is Italian. A lot of people in Argentina have an Italian surname. And so if I do not speak in Spanish or tell anybody, I'm light skinned. People don't know that. It's not intuitive to them. And a lot of people don't know that Latinx people can range from white to black. So anyway, so I heard people talking at the library about why Hispanic people, why we just don't learn English, and that's what enslaves us. And it was like this whole long conversation. And I didn't say anything right then, because I was actually frozen. Even though I speak in this area, that's very hurtful to me, obviously. And I have heard that a lot. In fact, I've heard that throughout my entire life. And so this is a part where if you have allies and you can build allyship with people and have other people at that moment speak up for you, it is helpful. And I didn't have anyone right then. Again, I was new, but I have had that before. And I have done that for other people too, where I've seen colleagues that I'm working with kind of be frozen, like, I don't know what to say right now, where I have used my voice to say, what did you mean by that? That's not what I know to be true of whatever. So I've had that happen to me before. And the book that Linda is talking about, that she put it in the chat, is actually excellent. And I shared a tip sheet from that book, and it gives you some ideas about how to know what to say. Sometimes you don't know what to say. You are frozen. Like, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened, or that person just said that to me. And role playing a little bit and having some things of what you would say in your language, you know, all of us are generationally different, is helpful, you know? So those are things that I have found helpful.
Right. Yeah. And having those little like tips, having a canned response, just being able to say, that's racist.
And even something like saying, you know, people always say that about how they should learn the language in this country. And I always respond, you know, I'm a traveler and I don't really have an affinity for other language. I marvel at people that come to the country and learn English the way they do, because when I travel, I have a really difficult time using other languages. And sometimes that kind of makes them think, you know, often they're the people when they're traveling in other countries, they're annoyed because that other country doesn't speak English fluently, because in this country, we feel we should be able to travel the world and everyone should speak English and cater to us. But sometimes just saying that about the traveling makes somebody take pause.
That's
That's
very
true.
true.
That's true, Linda. That's a great call out. And just so we're all clear too. And Annabelle, I like your point about maybe the person wants to have an argument with you. Remember the context of where we live. So I think all of us on the call are local or live in New Jersey. New Jersey has one of the highest amounts of hate groups in the United States. The Southern Poverty Law Center tracks it. So we're not a small state, but we got a lot of hate here. So you really may have someone that you cannot educate or help. They are just looking for a confrontation from you. And so there is some of that too to make you weary.
Right.
That I did not know. In the chat, Liz pointed out that she feels outraged with people her own age who say disparaging comments. And she says, I have no tolerance. We have been through enough so that we should know better. The question is how to challenge in a way that affects change. And a great source for responses to racist comments. There's a book called Say the Right Thing, How to Talk About Identity, Diversity, and Justice. And the authors are Kenji Yoshino and David Glasgow. And then there's also a link in the chat from Laura that she put in that there's a tip sheet from a book that's very good. Thank you so much, Laura and Liz. Anyone else?
Did you have more to present, Annabelle, on your
Yes, sorry, the
I
internet
mean, when
just
you're,
cut out.
I suppose when you're ready to take your screen share down, then we can continue with your audience. You had an audience participation thing you wanted to do.
Okay. Okay, so
Whenever
then
you're
she
ready,
can
Annabelle.
proceed.
Okay. Well, actually, this was honestly best. Sorry, my computer's a little bit slow right now.
We've all had that happen.
I'm gonna just try again. Sorry about that. Okay, so this was my last slide, and it's how to defend someone else. So a little quote, I'm sure, like, I'm Christian, but love your neighbor as yourself. And that's Mark 12:31. That's basically the golden rule. And so it's not difficult. It's you respond for someone else in the way that you would respond for yourself. And if you're around your friends, it can be in a less like formal manner too. Just be like, hey, that's not cool. Or why did you say that? Why would you say that? Start with a question. Or make like a lighthearted joke to follow. Sometimes adding humor to the situation can always lighten it up. And I've always found that effective. So yeah, and for the person in the chat who said, like, I'm really upset by like all of this racism that surrounds me, but I want to try to challenge that in an effective way. I would say again, try to make it a more educational experience to the perpetrator, but then speak up to people. If it's in like a workforce, then maybe talk to someone or like report the situation if it's really severe, or just speak to speak to the victim and speak to the person who's inciting all of it, because the aggressor, because when you speak to the aggressor, you can show that like that kind of behavior isn't tolerated by others. And then when you speak to the person who was targeted, just comfort them and act compassionate. Because I will say that after my incident, when people like reached out to me, it did show me that okay, at least people recognize that it is wrong.
Mhm.
So yeah, and just know that your voice can make a difference. You can make a difference from any point of view. So whether you're a friend of someone, whether you're the one being targeted. And then I did have an activity. I was going to give like practice scenarios. But honestly, also we could just, if people wanted to share their own experiences or like things they've witnessed, then we could just talk about how we might go about addressing those. Or like if we could go back in time, how we would address those now that you have these tips.
Mhm.
Annabelle, if I could just comment, before when we were doing this program in-house, we had large audiences, and a lot of the elderly people would say, oh, well, the young people today, there is no racism. And I would get very frustrated by this because I would feel, well, I'm sure that, you know, not everyone has parents that aren't racist or prejudiced. And so there are young children that are certainly prejudiced. And then after we had Donald Trump as our president, people felt more inclined to be able to say racist comments and not be called on it. And as you say, in our state, I think New Jerseyans pride themselves on, oh, well, we're in New Jersey, we're so diverse. But what Laura said about the hate groups, I mean, very close to where we work in Red Bank, there are some of the greatest concentration in Homedale and Colts Neck of hate groups in the country, probably. So it's really good to hear your take about, you know, hearing these kinds of comments. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about what you feel your generation, how they deal with racism.
So with my generation, I agree. I completely agree about like our specific demographic with hate groups, because you'll be in these like pockets, and like the area that I live in is not very diverse. In fact, like here's a short story. So I live in Spring Lake, and so in town.
In Spring Lake.
But
I go to the beach in Spring
oh,
Lake.
it's beautiful. I know.
It
I'm
is
actually a
beautiful.
block from the beach. So
It's very beautiful, but with that said,
yeah, and it's a great community too. But within town they put up these statues every year, and it's like this artist who put up these really realistic statues of different people, and they put a Black woman like holding a baby or something like that, like just as one of the statues. And it's actually really funny, like you'll be just walking on the street and then you'll like have to take like a double look because you think like it's a real person, they're that realistic. But so apparently this one man, he went to the Spring Lake Community House and reported that statue and said, this is like disrespectful to the culture of Spring Lake because no Black people live here. And I just thought that was ridiculous. I mean, so many people did. And it was, and like that's another problem. And like coming from someone who is like biracial in a primarily white community, hearing something like that, it makes it seem like the culture is very exclusive when really it's meant to be inclusive as a community. Like the culture is community, it's not white people against all. It's not meant to be that. So a lot of people completely disagreed with what he said and were like, that's ridiculous that he would say that. So I don't mean to say that many people in my area are racist by any means, but it is true that there are that people. So with that said, in my generation, a lot of kids think and act in the way that their parents do at my age. So it's very uncommon to see teenagers who have different opinions from their parents. And it's all really generational. So, like Miss Phelps, hearing that your friend was trying to be less, like less racist, coming from a racist family, is like it's actually respectable. But like I've just always found that, and some people, again, like they don't mean to be disrespectful, but the things they say are a little bit racist. Like again, in my area, that I've had people just ask me, "What are you? What are
Right.
you?" That's always the question. What am I? I'm American, but what is my heritage? I'm half Indian, half Italian. So it's people are just a little bit less socially aware. And that's the other thing I wanted to say for everyone on this call is that no matter what your background is, you're American, and that's like the one thing that we all are. So like this country isn't owned by white people. It's not. It's meant for everyone. And another thing that I found, especially during social media, so many people posted, so many people spoke out. Celebrities in this day and age have so much impact on people. Like when a celebrity says something, it makes a completely different, like it can lead to a whole ripple of effect. And yeah, so that's another really big thing. Reposting things, sometimes it doesn't have to just be like you saying something, but when you repost it, it shows that you agree with what they're saying. And again, it's adding momentum to a certain view. So social media is definitely big. I shared my love for music, and I feel that through art and music, a lot of people have found ways to express themselves and kind of combat the lack of like coordination between people nowadays. And then on like from an everyday kind basis, kids or like teenagers usually won't say anything if it means that they're going to be involved in drama. That's the truth. And people are most likely to stay quiet or to laugh it off. And it's honestly, it's just like a branch of bullying. I mean, obviously it can get like really intense in certain situations because as you said, and this is so true, like emotion, people can't control their teenagers don't typically control their emotions as well as adults can because they don't see the consequences as easily. But like there's just so much, and again, a lot of people don't really have the right preparation for those experiences. And so they'll just act how their emotions, how their feelings tell them to. And but yeah, most people just don't say anything. I have experienced so much too where other people say something about another person and it becomes a joke and like people find it funny. Like racism has literally become some people's sense of humor and it's sick. It's like it's just very wrong. But again, like as much momentum goes into people combating racism, there's so much momentum that goes into people being acting racist. And like it's one follower after the next after the next. That's why it's so important to just like say something, hey, that's not cool. Because that like rewires the momentum. So if you can say anything at any point in time, say something. That's what I've learned.
Thank you. Patty, do you want to share what you have?
Oh, yeah, this is great. So when Laura mentioned hearing a comment and feeling frozen, I that is a very common experience for me. Liz Jacobelli mentioned being angry. That's even more of a problem for me. I have almost gotten into fights with people because, I mean, not to reinforce the Irish stereotype, but when my Irish gets up, it's a thing. And so I don't want to be frozen and I don't want to start a fight. But I remember one time, and countless episodes have gone by where I didn't know what to say and I didn't even know how to revisit it in some of the ways you suggested, which were excellent. But when I was in nursing school, I'm having dinner with one of my fellow students. So this is back in the 70s, and out of absolutely nowhere, she starts ranting against the Jews. The Jews this, the Jews are that. I was like, we weren't even talking about anything. And I said, oh, well, you know, what if I told you I'm Jewish? I should have just said I'm a Jew, although I'm not, but it had the same effect. What if I tell you I'm Jewish? Her face just fell. She was mortified for a second, only a second. And then she pulled herself together and says, no, you're not. I said, yeah, well, that's not the point, is it? But I got her attention. And in recent years, you know, I'm thinking, well, I truly believe we are all one human family. So yes, we identify as Americans, but we all are related to everyone on the planet. We are all descendants of people from all over the planet for thousands of centuries. So if somebody says a comment to me disparaging another group, what I would like to say, I haven't had this opportunity yet, but what I would like to say is, you know, I have Black people in my family. I have Jews in my family, blah, 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 thinking of the whole human race as my family. And most people, that will get their attention. They might only pause for a second and then dismiss you because now you're part of the group they don't like, which, you know, is fine with me. But that's that's what I would like to remember to do the next time something happens.
Yeah,
But
that's
thank
a
you,
great
Annabelle.
strategy. And that's really interesting too, because my dad was like, I was like crying. I was like, oh, like I just didn't know what to say. And he said, like, and that also goes along with the step about like personalizing your response. Like, you could literally just say, hey, my mom is Indian. Like, you insulting my heritage is like insulting her. So don't say that.
And even if it isn't your mom or someone in your family, to say, you know, I think one of the important things you've been talking about is educating people. Instead of confronting them, sometimes it's better to say something like, well, you know, I have a friend and that hasn't been my experience from what she's told me, or, you know, telling somebody about something. Like we always say, it's very important to understand everyone's story, because once you hear their personal story, it might change how you feel, instead of hearing these things presented as facts, which are not facts. So maybe relating somebody else's story and presenting it that way is a way to make that person maybe, just maybe, think a little bit differently.
Yeah. Another common microaggression, though, that people really don't realize, but I feel like it's so common, is when you address that someone's being racist, they'll say, hey, no, I have so many Asian friends. I have so many Asian friends. I have so many Black friends. I have so many Indian friends. Like, that in itself is kind of a microaggression, because then you're like almost classifying them as like a different category of friends. And like, even though again they mean well, it's also disrespectful.
In the comments, Sue Goldberg had said, I'm sorry, I lost it right now, about when you had written the Christian. Sue Goldberg said, there is love your neighbor as yourself in Leviticus in the Old Testament too. I mean, pretty much.
Yes, I think it is the Old Testament, actually.
The comment got around for a long time. It
There's
must be good.
There's a version of the golden rule in, I think, every major religion in the world, a version of it. Yeah.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, definitely. And that gets back to even like racism, not just responding to racism, but the roots of it.
Yes.
Like, we should each just respect each other as humans. The human family. I love that.
Laura had her hand up a minute ago.
I was just gonna say, so arming yourself with facts, like Annabelle was saying, is so important. We have to remember most Americans live in racial segregation in the United States. I know we see a lot more diverse friendship groups on TV, like on Netflix, but that's not what the statistics show. The statistics show that we really do not have outside friendships within our own racial identity as we identify in the United States. And if we do, they're surface relationships. They're not deep ones. So I think a lot of people think that they are more like cool with stuff than they really are, because they do not have a lot of experience with other people. I wanted to comment, I think it was Sue who made posted some chat comments though. So remember, if you're living in Monmouth County was the head of the KKK in the 1920s in your area. They owned the Monmouth Pleasure Club, which was where the Marconi station is. There's a lot of history of that here, and it didn't go away, by the way. It's something that I'm working on and writing right now, but up until like the 90s, they still like advertised in like the Asbury Press. So there's a lot of the instances of anti-Semitic comments is on the rise now. So we have to remember where we are. Monmouth and Ocean County had a lot of segregated schools. Monmouth County had close to 30 alone. And they were in existence until like the 60s, right before the Civil Rights Act made them not be allowed any longer. So there's a large history of segregation in our state and things like that. So a lot of times I think we forget what the history is really like in New Jersey and why we might see these aggressions. Again, I think Annabelle said it, where like a lot of people are just like what their parents were. So if a lot of us are from here and that's what our parents were like, that explains a lot of behavior that we see with people or comments that they make.
And I completely agree with that too. It's such a huge phenomenon just within society in general that people stick with people typically stick with their race. Like a lot of Asian people will migrate towards Asian people, or white people will migrate towards white people. And I feel like that's so interesting too. And like it's great to have culture, but like it's also very important to intertwine too. But I think it's just because, in my personal opinion on it, like why certain races just migrate towards each other is because it's like, I guess, what they're most comfortable around. But it goes to show that people do like see the race in other people. And that's like the first thing we need to erase from society, because like when you can just see a person as a person instead of as a blank person, then that's when we can really create a diverse community.
Annabelle, would this be a good time to share that stand up for the other pledge?
Yeah, definitely.
So in the chat box, everyone, I put a link to a website. It's called Sign the Stand Up Pledge. And it's an endeavor, an initiative by someone in New Jersey that, you know, they're collecting signatures, but the point of this is to encourage us each to stand up for the other. I'm going to read the pledge, and it says, while interacting with members of my own faith or ethnic or gender community or with others, if I hear hateful comments from anyone about members of any other community, I pledge to stand up for the other and speak up to challenge bigotry in any form. So this goes completely along with Annabelle's whole presentation, not only to stand up on behalf of ourselves if we're being challenged or insulted or otherwise harassed, but and this is the important thing to me about this program, Let's Talk About Race, because the people, by and large, who attend our program already hold these principles dear, that everyone is important. And when we are in our day-to-day activities, we're in spaces very often where some people will speak up because they think that you're going to agree with, you know, their critical comments, etc. And those are the places where we can, each of us, speak out in some kind of way, especially with all the different hints that Annabelle gave us, to defend the person who is not there. So, thank you, Annabelle.
No
Thank you so
problem.
much. That's a great pledge.
Any other questions before we're getting close to when we end for the evening? Annabelle, I want to see you when you're 30, because considering what you've done at 15 years of age, we want to definitely have you back, because the information that you imparted tonight. Sometimes we feel like we're preaching to the choir, but you have given us a lot of things to think about, and it really has been a great presentation. Thank you very, very much. I think we had a
Thank
couple
you.
more things. Well, it was our pleasure to have you with us. As I said, one difficulty we've had has been getting young people to join the conversation. So it was great to have you with us. Sue Goldberg also noted, and we've talked about this a lot in this program, if we continually remember that New Jersey was the last northern state to ratify the 13th Amendment, it will keep us sober about the hate that still exists here. And that is one thing that I was really not aware of, was just
Yeah.
how
Knowing
much-
history,
Yes.
knowledge, all.
I mean, people are
It's
now
all useful.
accusing us of rewriting history, but when history has been not recorded accurately, it's really important to talk about our real history. I don't know why so many people are afraid of that, but they are. Anybody else before we close? We had a few new people tonight. I thank you very much for joining us. And as always, please tell your friends this is recorded.
Mark your calendars. August 30th will be Laura Giacobbe's presentation on racial healing.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. This was a wonderful program. Keep doing the good work and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Annabelle.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have all of you.
Well, it was our pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you for
friends.
the
Thank you.
information. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.